The crystal palace of Valdoria stretched higher than any building on Earth. Ambassador Ben walked through halls made of living starlight, his boots clicking against floors that seemed to be carved from frozen rainbows. Even after 3 months on this world, the beauty of alien architecture still took his breath away. But today, beauty was not on his mind. Today was the day that would decide if humanity earned respect among the stars, or remained forever labeled as a primitive species barely worth notice. Ben adjusted his formal diplomatic jacket and checked his translation device one more time. The small earpiece hummed softly, ready to convert his English words into the common galactic language that most alien species used for trade and politics. What the device could not do, however, was translate the tone of contempt that seemed to follow him everywhere he went in this palace. The massive doors to the throne room opened with a sound like singing crystals. Ben stepped inside and immediately felt small. The chamber was designed to intimidate visitors. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, while pillars of pure light supported floating balconies where alien nobles watched the proceedings below. Princess Zira sat upon her throne in the center of it all. Like all Valdorians, she was tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between silver and blue depending on the light. Her 4 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry on her face, tracked Ben's movement as he approached. 2 smaller eyes near her temples monitored the crowd while her main eyes studied the human ambassador. "The creature from Earth approaches," announced Lord Vex, the princess's chief advisor. His voice carried the musical quality that all Valdorians possessed, but Ben had learned to hear the mockery underneath the beauty. "Shall we begin this amusing display?" Ben bit back his first response. 3 months of negotiations had taught him that losing his temper would only prove their point about human primitiveness. Instead, he bowed in the formal Valdorian style, touching his forehead and spreading his arms wide. "Your Highness," Ben said, his translator converting the words into melodic alien speech. "I come seeking friendship between our peoples." Princess Zira's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Friendship? How charming. Tell us, little Earth dweller, what could your young species possibly offer to an empire that spans 1,000 worlds?" Ben had prepared for this question. He reached into his diplomatic case and withdrew a data pad containing humanity's greatest achievements. Medical advances that could extend alien lifespans. Artistic works that had moved even the coldest alien critics. Technologies for space travel that impressed even advanced civilizations. Humanity offers innovation, creativity, and partnership, Ben said. "We may be young, but we learn quickly and adapt to any challenge." Lord Vex leaned forward on his floating chair. "Learning and adapting? Like the animals in our planet's forests do?" The comparison was deliberate and insulting. Ben felt heat rise in his cheeks but kept his voice steady. "If your lordship wishes to think of it that way, then yes. But remember that sometimes the newest member of a group brings the freshest ideas. Fresh ideas from creatures who only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago." Princess Zira's voice carried amusement. "We were building interstellar empires when your ancestors were still living in caves." The nobles in the balconies above made sounds that Ben's translator interpreted as laughter, though they sounded more like musical waterfalls than human amusement. He pressed on, explaining humanity's offers of trade partnerships and cultural exchange. Each proposal was met with the same condescending attitude. The Valdorians would listen politely, then dismiss human achievements as crude attempts to copy superior alien methods. They suggested that humanity would be better served as a protectorate under Valdorian guidance rather than as an equal partner. "Perhaps," Lord Vex said after Ben finished his presentation, "your species would benefit from a few more centuries of development before attempting to join galactic civilization." "We appreciate your concern," Ben replied through gritted teeth, "but humanity is ready to contribute now." "Ready?" Princess Zira rose from her throne and descended the crystal steps with fluid grace. "Your kind has been in space for barely a moment. We have maintained peace and prosperity in this galaxy for 3,000 years. What wisdom could you possibly share with us?" Ben watched her approach and noticed something he had missed before. The princess wore a pendant around her neck, carved with symbols that looked familiar. He had seen similar markings during his research into alien cultures, but not in any modern Valdorian text. Your Highness speaks of 3,000 years of peace, Ben said carefully, but surely your people's history goes back much further than that. A strange look passed across Princess Zira's face. Of course. The Valdorian Empire has ancient roots. We simply prefer to focus on our recent achievements. Recent achievements are certainly impressive, Ben agreed. But I find myself curious about older traditions. Ancient wisdom from your homeworld, perhaps. Lord Vex moved closer, his 4 eyes narrowing. The human shows unusual interest in matters that do not concern him. Ben felt he was walking on dangerous ground, but something told him to press forward. I apologize if I seem overly curious. It's just that human historians have found references to older Valdorian cultures in our archaeological studies. We've discovered fascinating artifacts on worlds that your people once inhabited. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Princess Zira stopped walking and stared at Ben with all 4 eyes focused directly on him. What artifacts? Ancient texts, mostly, Ben said. Written in a language that resembles modern Valdorian but seems much older. Our linguists have been working to translate some of the simpler passages. Impossible, Lord Vex declared. No such texts exist. Ben reached slowly into his case again and withdrew a small tablet displaying high-resolution images of stone carvings. These were found on a dead world in the Kepler sector. The inscriptions appear to be some form of early Valdorian writing. Princess Zira took the tablet with hands that trembled slightly. Ben watched her 4 eyes scan the images, and he saw recognition flash across her features before she regained control. These are meaningless scratches, she said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Stone carvings made by primitive creatures, not by Valdorians. Ben had spent months preparing for this moment. He had studied not just the artifacts, but also Valdorian body language and facial expressions. He knew when they were lying. Perhaps your Highness is right, he said. Though our linguists did manage to translate a few words. Apparently they tell stories about great disasters and difficult journeys. The silence that followed was different from the earlier pauses in conversation. This was the silence of a people holding their breath, waiting to see if their deepest secret would be revealed. Ben made his decision. He had come here to earn respect for humanity, and sometimes respect could only be gained by showing that you knew more than others expected. In fact, Ben continued, one of our linguists believes she has identified the language completely. She calls it Old Valdorian, the original tongue of your people before it evolved into the modern form. Princess Zira's hands shook as she gripped the tablet. That name means nothing to us. But Ben could see in her eyes that it meant everything. He thought of Earth, of the billions of humans waiting to learn whether they would be accepted as equals or dismissed as children. He thought of the condescending laughter from the nobles above, and the casual way the Valdorians had dismissed every human achievement. Then Ben made a choice that would change the course of galactic history. He spoke, not in English or in common galactic language, but in the ancient words he had spent months learning from those stone carvings. His pronunciation was probably imperfect, but the meaning was clear enough. Your ancestors would weep to see what you have become. The crystal palace fell completely silent. Princess Zira dropped the tablet, and it shattered against the floor with a sound like breaking stars. Her silver-blue skin turned pale, almost white, and her 4 eyes went wide with shock and terror. Every noble in the floating balconies stopped breathing. Lord Vex stepped backward as if Ben had just grown fangs and claws. Ben stood in the center of it all, waiting to see what his words had unleashed. He had spoken the forbidden language, the tongue that contained truths too dangerous for the modern Valdorian Empire to acknowledge. Now he would learn whether humanity's gamble had paid off, or whether he had just started a war that would consume entire star systems. The princess began to tremble, and Ben knew there was no going back. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, though only seconds had passed. Ben watched Princess Zira's face cycle through emotions he had never seen on a Valdorian before. Fear, shame, anger, and something else he could not identify. Lord Vex was the first to break the silence. His musical voice cracked like a broken instrument. How does the human know those words? How is this possible? Princess Zira raised one trembling hand to silence her advisor. Her 4 eyes remained fixed on Ben, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You understand what you have done, human? Ben nodded slowly. I believe so, Your Highness. I have spoken words that were forbidden for good reason. Then you know the penalty for speaking the old tongue in this court? Death, Ben replied calmly. But I also know why those words are forbidden, and I know that truth is sometimes more powerful than any law. The nobles in the floating balconies began to murmur among themselves. Ben heard fragments of conversation, translated by his device into worried English phrases. What did he say? Why does the princess look so frightened? What language was that? Princess Zira gestured sharply, and the murmuring stopped instantly. She stepped closer to Ben, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns in her silver-blue skin that marked her as royal blood. Tell me exactly what your people know, she commanded. Ben reached into his diplomatic case once more and withdrew a larger data pad. We know about the homeworld, Your Highness. We know about the Great Exodus. We know why your people really left their birth planet and why they forbid anyone from speaking of it. The princess's breathing became rapid and shallow. Impossible. All records were destroyed. All witnesses sworn to silence. Not all records, Ben said gently. Stone carvings on dead worlds tell stories that cannot be erased. Ancient databases hidden in the ruins of forgotten colonies preserve truths that your empire tried to bury. He activated the data pad, and holographic images filled the air between them. Pictures of alien ruins, close-ups of stone tablets, reconstructed star maps showing the path of Valdorian Exodus ships thousands of years ago. Your ancestors were refugees, Ben continued. They fled a dying world that they themselves had poisoned through war and environmental destruction. The beautiful, noble Valdorian Empire was built on the ashes of their own failures. Princess Zira's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees on the crystal floor. The sight of royalty kneeling before a human sent shockwaves through the assembled nobles. Several of them began demanding answers in voices that grew louder and more panicked by the second. Silence. Lord Vex shouted, his translator struggling to convert his emotional outburst into human words. The human speaks lies. Propaganda designed to weaken our resolve. But Ben could see that Lord Vex did not believe his own words. The advisor's 4 eyes kept darting between the holographic evidence and his princess, searching for some way to deny what was clearly true. The refugees who became your ancestors made a pact, Ben said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast throne room. They agreed never to speak of their shame. They created new histories, new traditions, new languages to hide from the truth of what they had done to their homeworld. More images appeared in the holographic display. Artistic reconstructions based on archaeological evidence, showing the original Valdorian homeworld in its final days. Cities choked with poisonous smoke. Rivers that ran black with industrial waste. Massive wars fought over the last clean water and fertile soil. They swore that future generations would never know how close the Valdorian people came to extinction, Ben continued. They created the myth of ancient nobility and superior wisdom to hide the fact that they had nearly destroyed themselves through greed and short-sightedness. Princess Zira looked up at him from where she knelt. Tears ran down her face, though they glowed with inner light like liquid stars. Why? Why do this to us? Why reveal our shame? Ben knelt down beside her, ignoring the gasps of shock from the nobles who had never seen anyone treat Valdorian royalty as an equal. Because shame that is hidden becomes poison, Your Highness. But shame that is acknowledged can become wisdom. He gestured to the holographic displays around them. Your ancestors survived their mistakes and built something beautiful from the ruins of their failures. That is not shameful. That is remarkable. But the Empire, Princess Zira whispered. Our authority, our right to rule, our place in galactic society. If the other species learn that we are not the ancient, noble race we claim to be, then you will become something better, Ben said firmly. You will become a people who face truth instead of hiding from it. Lord Vex descended from his floating platform, his movements jerky with anger and fear. The human seeks to destroy us. He wants to bring down our empire and replace it with human dominance. Ben stood and faced the advisor calmly. Humanity seeks partnership, not dominance. We reveal this truth not to destroy you, but to save you from destroying yourselves. Save us? Lord Vex laughed bitterly. From what? Ben activated another section of his data pad. New images appeared, showing recent Valdorian industrial planets where the same mistakes were being repeated. Strip mining that left worlds barren. Chemical processing that poisoned atmospheres. The endless expansion that consumed resources faster than they could be replaced. You are following the same path that destroyed your homeworld, Ben said. The forbidden language contains not just history, but warnings. Lessons learned in blood and suffering that could prevent you from making the same mistakes again. Princess Zira stared at the images with growing horror. She recognized the industrial planets, had even visited some of them to celebrate their productivity and growth. The old words, she said slowly. The forbidden phrases. They are not just historical records. They are wisdom, Ben confirmed. Instructions for how to build a civilization that sustains itself instead of consuming itself. Your ancestors learned these lessons the hard way, but they preserved them in language that your modern empire was too proud to study. The princess struggled to her feet, her royal composure beginning to return despite her tears. You could have used this knowledge to conquer us. Why instead do you offer it as a gift? Ben smiled, the first genuine smile he had shown since entering the palace. Because humanity has made similar mistakes, Your Highness. We nearly destroyed our own world through pollution and war. We understand the shame of looking back at our history and seeing so much that we wish we could change. He gestured to the evidence floating around them. But we also learned that wisdom comes not from pretending our mistakes never happened, but from studying them carefully so they are never repeated. The throne room erupted into chaos as nobles began shouting questions and demands. Some called for Ben's immediate execution for speaking forbidden words. Others demanded to know more about the ancient history their empire had hidden from them. A few began arguing among themselves about which industrial projects should be stopped immediately. Through it all, Princess Zira stood silent, staring at the holographic reconstructions of her people's true past. Ben could see her mind working, processing not just the historical truth, but its implications for the future. The other species, she said finally, her voice cutting through the noise and restoring order to the room. The galactic community. If they learn of this. They already know, Ben said quietly. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. Humanity has shared these discoveries with several neutral species, Ben continued. Not as weapons, but as historical records that belong to the galactic community. The truth is already spreading. Princess Zira closed her 4 eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, Ben saw something new there. Not the fear and shame that had dominated her expression, but a kind of grim determination. Then we have a choice to make, she said. We can try to suppress this truth and be remembered as a people who lived a lie, or we can embrace it and be remembered as a people who learned from their mistakes. Lord Vex stepped forward, his voice desperate. Your Highness, surely there must be another way. Some method of containing this information. No, Princess Zira said firmly. I have spent my entire life believing that our ancestors were perfect beings who never made mistakes. I thought that wisdom meant never admitting fault or showing weakness. She turned to face Ben directly. But perhaps true wisdom means something else entirely. The princess looked up at the nobles in their floating balconies, then back at Ben. You said that humanity has shared this information with neutral species. What else have you shared? Ben activated the final section of his data pad. Solutions, Your Highness. Technologies and techniques that Earth developed to heal the damage we had done to our world. Methods of production that sustain rather than consume. Diplomatic frameworks for species to work together instead of competing for resources. And you offer these to us? As partners, Ben said. Not as subjects or protectorates, but as equals working together to build something better than either of us could create alone. Princess Zira nodded slowly. The trembling had stopped, replaced by a steadiness that reminded Ben that she was, after all, the heir to an empire. Then let us discuss what true partnership means, she said. And let us do so in the language of truth, not the language of comfortable lies. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as the princess prepared to make a choice that would echo across the galaxy. Princess Zira stood in the center of the crystal throne room, surrounded by floating holographic displays that showed the true history of her people. The evidence of their ancestors' mistakes and redemption glowed around her like ghosts made of light. Ben watched her face as she processed not just the historical truth, but what it meant for the future of her empire. The nobles in the floating balconies had fallen silent, waiting for their princess to speak. Some looked angry, others confused, but most showed the same mixture of fear and curiosity that Ben had seen in Princess Zira's expression. Lord Vex, Princess Zira said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made a life-changing decision. Summon the Translation Council immediately. I want every member of the court to understand exactly what the human ambassador has shared with us. Lord Vex looked horrified. Your Highness, surely we should discuss this privately first. Perhaps consult with the ruling council, consider the implications. The time for private discussions has ended, Princess Zira replied firmly. Our people deserve to know their true history, just as they deserve to know the truth about our future. She turned to Ben, and he could see a new strength in her posture. The trembling fear had been replaced by something more powerful. Ambassador Ben, you spoke of partnership. What exactly does humanity propose? Ben deactivated his data pad and stepped forward. A joint council, Your Highness. Representatives from both our species working together to address the environmental challenges that both our civilizations face. Earth can share our techniques for healing damaged worlds, while Valdoria contributes your advanced technology and knowledge of galactic politics. And the other species? Princess Zira asked. How do we face the galactic community now that our shameful history has been revealed? Together, Ben said simply. As species who have learned from their mistakes and are committed to doing better. The galaxy has room for many different kinds of wisdom, including the wisdom that comes from surviving failure. The Translation Council arrived within minutes, a group of 6 Valdorians whose job was to make sure that important diplomatic conversations could be understood by everyone present. They looked nervous as they took their positions around the throne room. Princess Zira gestured for silence, then began to speak in Old Valdorian. Ben listened as she told the assembled court everything. The destruction of the original homeworld. The Exodus ships filled with refugees. The deliberate creation of false histories to hide their shame. She spoke clearly and without hesitation, using the forbidden language to reclaim the wisdom their ancestors had tried to preserve. The translators worked frantically to convert her words into modern Valdorian and common galactic language. As the meaning became clear, the reaction from the noble balconies was explosive. Some nobles shouted in anger, demanding that the princess stop spreading lies about their glorious heritage. Others called for Ben's immediate execution for corrupting their royal family with human propaganda. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the complete transformation of everything they thought they knew about their people. But Princess Zira continued speaking, moving from history to hope. She explained how the ancient language contained not just records of failure, but instructions for building a better future. She described the environmental restoration techniques that humanity offered to share. She outlined a vision of Valdorian and human colonies working together to heal the damaged worlds that current industrial practices had left behind. We have a choice, she concluded, switching back to common galactic language so that Ben could understand every word. We can continue to live the lie that we are a perfect species with nothing to learn from others. Or we can embrace the truth that we are a species capable of great mistakes and even greater recovery. Lord Vex rose from his floating platform, his 4 eyes blazing with indignation. Your Highness speaks of embracing truth, but what of our authority? What of our position in galactic politics? If we admit to being refugees and environmental destroyers, every species in the galaxy will see us as weak. Princess Zira smiled, and Ben was struck by how much her expression had changed since the beginning of their meeting. Where once there had been condescending amusement, now there was genuine strength. Weakness, Lord Vex. Is it weak to admit mistakes and work to fix them? Is it weak to share knowledge that could prevent other species from following the same destructive path? She gestured to the holographic displays that still showed the environmental damage on current Valdorian industrial worlds. What is truly weak is continuing policies that we know will lead to disaster simply because we are too proud to change. But the other empires, Lord Vex protested. The Krylon Federation, the Nexus Collective, the Independent Worlds Alliance. They will see this as an opportunity to reduce Valdorian influence. Ben stepped forward. Actually, Lord Vex, early reports suggest the opposite. The species that humanity has briefed on this situation are impressed by Princess Zira's willingness to face the truth. They see it as a sign of strength, not weakness. He activated a section of his data pad that he had kept in reserve for this moment. In fact, we have already received preliminary expressions of interest from several species who want to participate in the Joint Environmental Restoration Program. New holographic displays appeared, showing official communications from various alien governments. Ben watched the nobles' expressions change as they read messages of support and cooperation rather than the mockery and exploitation they had expected. The Aquatic Confederacy wants to share their water purification technologies, Ben read from one message. The Silicon Collective offers advanced recycling systems. The Botanical Union has techniques for rapid ecosystem restoration. Princess Zira studied the communications with growing amazement. They want to work with us. Even knowing our history. Especially knowing your history, Ben replied. Every species has made mistakes, Your Highness. What makes a civilization truly advanced is not the absence of failure, but the willingness to learn from failure and help others avoid the same traps. A new voice spoke from the noble balconies. Lady Nira, one of the younger court members, descended on her floating platform to address the princess directly. Your Highness, Lady Nira said, if what the human says is true, then this could be the beginning of a new golden age for our people. Instead of ruling through fear of our superiority, we could lead through the example of our growth. Other nobles began to murmur agreement. Ben could see the tide of opinion shifting as the Valdorians began to understand that honesty might actually strengthen their position rather than weaken it. Lord Vex made one final attempt to preserve the old ways. And what of our military superiority? Our economic dominance? If we enter into these partnerships as equals rather than rulers, we surrender the advantages that have kept our empire strong for 3,000 years. Princess Zira walked to her throne but did not sit down. Instead, she placed one hand on the crystal armrest and addressed not just Lord Vex, but the entire assembled court. Our military superiority means nothing if we destroy the worlds we claim to protect. Our economic dominance means nothing if our industrial practices leave dead planets in their wake. The advantages you speak of are temporary. The partnership's ambassador Ben proposes could last for generations. She turned to face Ben directly. Ambassador, on behalf of the Valdorian Empire, I accept humanity's proposal for partnership. But I have a condition of my own. Ben inclined his head respectfully. What condition, Your Highness? I want human advisors present when we begin teaching Old Valdorian to our people again. Your species understands the value of learning from mistakes. I want that perspective available as we rediscover our own forgotten wisdom. The request surprised Ben, but he could see the wisdom in it. Earth would be honored to participate in that process, Your Highness. Princess Zira finally sat on her throne, but her posture was different now. Instead of the distant authority she had displayed earlier, she seemed more approachable, more human in the best sense of the word. Then let it be recorded, she announced, that this day marks the beginning of a new chapter in Valdorian history. We will no longer hide from our past, but instead learn from it. We will no longer claim perfection, but instead strive for constant improvement. The Crystal Palace filled with the sound of noble voices raised in agreement. Some still sounded uncertain, but Ben could hear genuine enthusiasm in many of them. The prospect of participating in something greater than their empire alone seemed to energize the Valdorian court. There is one more thing, Princess Zira said as the voices quieted. Ambassador Ben, your species has proven today that wisdom and courage can be more powerful than military might or economic pressure. I want the galaxy to understand what humanity has accomplished here. She gestured to her communication officers. Send word to all member species of the galactic community. Inform them that the Valdorian Empire formally recognizes Earth as a full partner in galactic civilization, with all the rights and responsibilities that such partnership entails. Ben felt his heart racing as he realized what this meant. Humanity would no longer be seen as a primitive species seeking acceptance. They would be recognized as equals, with a voice in galactic politics and access to the advanced technologies and knowledge that came with full membership. Your Highness is most generous, Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. Generosity has nothing to do with it, Princess Zira replied. This is simple recognition of what your species has earned through wisdom and courage. As the formal ceremonies began to establish the new partnership, Ben reflected on how completely the situation had changed. He had entered this palace as a supplicant hoping to earn basic respect for humanity. He was leaving as the architect of an alliance that would reshape galactic politics. The forbidden words had indeed changed everything, but not through destruction. Instead, they had opened a path to a future where truth was valued more than pride, where cooperation replaced domination, and where even ancient empires could learn new ways to flourish. In the days that followed, news of the Valdorian revelation and the human partnership spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to examine their own histories more honestly, and several more civilizations requested to join the growing alliance of worlds committed to learning from their mistakes. Humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from the courage to speak difficult truths and offer genuine friendship to those brave enough to listen.